Hello, everyone. I'm Helen McGrath, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and I'm joined this week by Dennis Hall, our Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everyone.
So, Dennis, what topic have you got for us this week?
Well, the news, of course, is full of local authorities declaring Section 114 notices as a result of being unable to balance their budgets. And more so-called bankruptcies of local authorities are expected, and expected soon. How timely, then, that Grant Thornton published their report last Thursday on preventing failure in local government. It is a must-read for all officers involved in corporate management, and the Golden Triangle officers in particular. LLG and a number of other key partners have contributed to the report, which helpfully examines a number of issues. First, the question of how can we prevent failure in the first place? Second, how to understand the causes of that failure. Third, the effect of those financial pressures that we've reported on so many times. And finally, the opportunities that exist to prevent failure. Helen, you might like to begin by saying something about the work of LLG, which it's been doing with Grant Thornton, and discussing that part of the report that deals with, well, the question, how can we actually prevent failure?
Yes, well, this has been a almost a year-long endeavour for LLG. We started discussions with Grant Thornton in the new year, and Solace and SIPFA and ALATS at the beginning, certainly ALATS were heavily involved. And from that, we were able to host a number of round tables. And, you know, I've really got to thank our membership here, the MOs and the deputy MOs that stepped forward to contribute hugely. And in fact, this was not just constrained to those organisations I've just mentioned. This was a whole sector input. We had people from the Association of Democratic Services Officers. There were also clerks as well that SLC were able to put forward in order to assist discussions. So it was a massive piece of work that really did look widely and more broadly within the sector in order to formulate the conclusions that you find in the report. Now, it would be easy to be overwhelmed by the contents of the report and feel slightly pessimistic. I know that lawyers tend to be pessimistic, but there is an opportunity here. If we understand why failure happens, then surely, you know, the first step would be to ensure it doesn't happen again. So I mean, every local authority must get the basics of good governance right, including robust structures, effective systems, and positive and appropriate behaviours. And, you know, the report talks about the Nolan principles, but, you know, obviously we've had the Nolan principles for a really, really long time. You know, what we need to do is establish mutual expectations. And as the report says, underpin strong relationships and good communications between senior officers and executive members, and actually really apply those Nolan principles. I don't know if there's anything else in there, Dennis, that really stood out for you in relation to.
Yeah, that last point I think is a key one. I took from the report, and particularly the conclusions, if I can cut to the chase, is that going forward, we need all to work together. And that's not just local authorities and their associations, but also LLG, Solace, SIPFA, all of the partners, all of the organizations that I've mentioned there have an influence in how we can get things right in the future. And if I may say at this point, what I got from this report that I hadn't thought of before I'd read the report is this, that the systems for protection and how we go about protection isn't about any one officer or group of officers. It's not just underpinned by one system, this question of prevention. We have a system of systems to support local government when it's in difficulty. I'll come on to that later, but that was an important point for me to realise from this report, Helen.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really stood out for me was this point around members balancing their political ambitions with their legal and moral duties to their councils and communities. And I think there are synergies playing at national level now and being discussed and debated around that, because often the political ambitions can put a lot of pressure on decision making in terms of types of what may then become quite risky endeavours. And we've seen that play out in terms of companies and investments. So I think optimism bias, avoid focusing too much on the potential benefits of projects and investments, and not enough on the company risks are definitely something that authorities really need to take on board. But Dennis, you've been looking at the part of the report on what opportunities there are to prevent failure in the future. So what does the report say on that?
Yeah, Helen, I was particularly interested in this particular high aspect of the report. In this part, the report highlights that local government, central government, the regulatory bodies and the professional bodies all have a part to play, as I said earlier. The report describes this as a unique chain of safeguards to protect the stewardship of public money. And as the report goes on to say, of course, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Now, the report also refers in this part to the role of the Local Audit and Accountability Act 2014 and the complex arrangements for local audit. But as I reported last week, there are backlogs nationally on local audits being performed. Yeah. And the Levelling Up Department are working to end this current backlog on local authority audits. Apparently, there are over 900 still outstanding. So that's clearly an issue here when we're looking at preventing financial issues. So again, back to this part of the report, who has the power to step in? Well, the list is comprehensive and helpfully reminds us that full council, the executive, overview and scrutiny, with proper reports in front of them, they should be looking at what's happening, where there are problem issues, highlighting them, reacting to them, and having recommendations for how to go forward with those issues. There are the traditional parts of the council that we often talk about in relation to financial issues, the audit committee, of course. And interestingly, highlighted is the role of the chief executive, something else we've discussed in our vlogs in the past. Not everything is about the role of the Section 151 officer and the monitoring officer in all of this. And I think this is what comes out from this part of the report in particular. It goes on to mention, of course, the role of internal audit as well. As is often emphasized, don't you think, at our conferences and our discussions about this report emphasizes that governance and financial governance is a shared responsibility. It doesn't lie on the shoulders of one or two officers.
No, absolutely not. And I think, to be honest, I mean, this report is very, very welcome, but I think that there are a number of things that have to happen to really safeguard local authorities in the future and you know, protect them from a failure. And that for LLG, you know, really is about the modernisation of local authority legislation, and you know, together with cultural improvements and sanctions. You know, we've got a huge recruitment and retention issue. We need to look at statutory officers' support and actually financial investment from government. But you know, evidence shows in terms of the monitoring officer, just bringing it back to our sector, that it's a clear red flag if the monitoring officer does not have a seat at the top table. Yep. and is not legally qualified, is what we say, and therefore is not central to discussions and decision making. So we will definitely be using the report as a springboard to develop a better way of working in order to support our drive for legal reform.
Yeah, in a nutshell, we've got to get all of those ducks in a row to make a success of preventing these kind of failures in the future.
Now, what we do take moving forwards, whether we do a review in 2024, I think is still subject to discussions, but I think it would be foolhardy not to capitalise on the research and where we are now, not to then reassess and work through some of the smaller work streams in order to improve advice and guidance to the sector. I think would be welcome. But we are definitely, in terms of our report, the report from the Local Government Information Unit in relation to the role of the monitoring officer, we will be holding a roundtable with Brown Jacobson in the new year to further consider the actions arising from that report. So on that note, don't forget to listen to the Grapevine podcast for all your local authority news. We'll be back for a final edition before Christmas break next week. So until then, it's goodbye from me.
And from me too. Bye.